kid.
Hey guys, what is going on? Chris here with Shughead Gaming, bringing you my review for Borderlands 2 VR, developed by Gearbox and releasing this December 14th on PSVR for an estimated price of $50. Of course, that depends on your region. As usual, this game was reviewed on the PS4 Pro. The iconic shooter-looter gets in your face. Virtually immerse yourself in the untamed world of Borderlands. Step into the boots of a treasure-seeking vault hunter armed with 87 bazillion guns on a quest to line your pockets with loot. Blast bandits with real-world aiming, punch psychos in the mouth, race across the desert in a stolen bandit vehicle, and free Pandora from Handsome Jack's clutches. Another PlayStation classic makes the leap to VR, but does it live up to the hype? Let's find out. As always guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing, and for video updates, hit that bell icon. And remember, if you want to see more PSVR news and info, check Shughead Gaming out on Twitter and Facebook. As always, graphics are up first. Borderlands 2 is the VR gem I never knew I wanted. Upon first stepping into the cel-shaded world I had played countless hours in almost 6 years ago, I was instantly blown away with how perfect a fit the Borderlands aesthetic worked in the current VR climate. With high detailed textures combined with draw distance and fast movement being the biggest burden on current VR tech, Borderlands 2's simpler visual take on the open world shooter made it a prime candidate for VR. And I'm happy to report that Borderlands 2 in VR makes very few concessions in the jump to PSVR and still delivers the frantic open world gameplay that made it the classic it is. Draw distance, with the exception of a few wide open and visually demanding areas, is actually fantastic, and besides the odd anti-aliasing issue here and there, Borderlands is ultra sharp when in the headset and honestly holds up better than I had thought possible for a game of this scope, even with its more cartoon approach to visuals. Visually, the game only seems to suffer one setback, and that is the tendency for the game to almost appear to drop frames when moving your head around to look around. Movement is smooth, and no screen tearing is visible, but the game does seem to chug from time to time, and that's on the Pro. Although it does detract from the overall visual impact, I must stress this was minor when in combat, and in fact really only obvious when looking for it in quieter moments. As it doesn't seem to be a result of heavy action, I'm hoping it can be rectified with some further optimization. A few other minor issues also crop up, like the flat cutscenes and the ever-irritating return of the clipping menu screens that, if opened at the wrong time, will partially be covered by environmental textures. True to Borderlands form, textures throughout are not bursting with detail, but when taken as a whole, Borderlands, even 6 years later, holds up as a nice-looking game. So yes, Borderlands 2 in VR delivers visually on par with the previous versions, but what is most important to discuss is what VR has brought to Borderlands. Like Skyrim, Resident Evil 7, and countless other titles, the difference between playing it on a TV and playing it in VR is the difference between being a curious bystander and actually existing in the world. For those watching this review and considering the jump into PSVR, I simply cannot explain the feeling of a 2-foot rifle out in front of you, or the intimidation of a boss fight when your combatant literally towers over you. Borderlands in VR is just another example of how VR is changing the way we experience game worlds, by literally putting the player into the game. And that brings us to sound. One of the things that makes Borderlands so special is its amazing voice talent. Not one to usually watch cutscenes in my games, Borderlands 2 had me straight up laughing my ass off at the clever and on-point dialogue throughout. I genuinely found almost every character interesting and very entertaining to interact with, whether it be the ever-witty and sassy Claptrap, the over-the-top villain Handsome Jack, or the multitude of outright zany side characters. Borderlands 2 has very few equals when it comes to sheer comedic chops.
Sorry about the mess. Everything Jack kills, he dumps here. Bandits, vault hunters, claptrap units. If I sound pleased about this, it's only because my programmers made this my default tone of voice. I'm actually quite depressed.
This attention to making every character interesting to interact with not only makes the game world feel alive and vibrant, but also helps to make even the more monotonous fetch quests feel important. Now, of course, a game so single-minded in its delivery of the shooter experience better nail the gun sounds. As was the case with the previous Borderlands games, weapon sounds are in fact excellent, managing to balance a fine line between realistic and authentic, but with just a touch of the zany attitude found throughout. The resulting weapon effects first and foremost are varied enough to make the insane amount of guns, elemental effects, and modifications feel varied enough to matter, and at the same time ensuring that they sound powerful and fun to use. Again, for the Borderlands virgins watching, Borderlands' music score is another high point in the sound mix, with memorable tracks that make the world feel epic and really help to complete the soundscape. Really, in the sound department, the only fault I can find would be the lack of a true 3D audio upgrade. Like Skyrim VR before it, instead we are left with the original surround sound mix, which, while still impressive, it does lack the true spatial audio for the best immersion possible. Gameplay is up next. With over 13 million copies of Borderlands 2 sold, chances are many of you have already played Borderlands 2, or at least are very familiar with the series. But for the uninitiated, Borderlands 2 is an open-world first-person shooter that lies somewhere between Destiny and Fallout, but with a better sense of humor and a healthy obsession with gun selection.
Guns, guns, guns.
In fact, with literally 17.75 million gun combinations, Borderlands is all about finding the perfect loadout for your playstyle. When starting out, you will choose between 4 character classes: Siren with her use of stasis powers, Assassin, whose focus is on stealth kills whether far away or up close, Commando, the well-rounded character with an upgradable sentry gun, and then my personal favorite, Gunzerker, a dual-wielding heavy class. All 4 classes with their own unique skill trees and special abilities can drastically vary the approach you take to combat, giving you the freedom to play the game the way you want to play it. The 30-hour campaign will take you across many hub worlds and offer up some truly fantastic characters who will keep you very busy doing a multitude of side quests alongside the main story thread. Borderlands 2's story isn't incredible, and the missions can all too often devolve into fetch quests and make work tasks, but it rarely matters because the highly addictive and fun gameplay loop of scrounging and killing for loot is what it's all about. Buying, selling, and winning all assortments of guns, shield generators, grenades, and perks is the everlasting carrot on the stick as you continue through the truly fantastic gunplay and firefights. Borderlands can be controlled with either 2 move controllers or the standard DS4 controller. Sorry, no aim support, guys. But as the community's crying for it, don't be surprised to see it added. A huge sticking point of mine, and one I am overjoyed Gearbox delivered on, is giving players the choice to play Borderlands 2 at the level in which they play VR. Regardless of what controller setup the player chooses, the options of teleportation, full locomotion, or a combination of the two are available. In addition, players can choose click turning, smooth turning, called gradual here, as well as how fast they move and turn, and the ability to turn on different levels of blinders. This is something I feel should be standard practice in all VR titles, so it's nice to see this level of customization in such a high-profile VR game release. While I feel many will prefer the ease of the DS4 controller with its dual analog sticks and head aiming, for me, the 2 move controllers were my preference. As someone who played with a standard controller for my entire life, I came to VR to play VR, so freehand aiming is what I wanted regardless of the learning curve with Sony's move controllers. In fact, for those with their VR legs and accustomed to playing full locomotion games on the PSVR with the move controllers, I think you will find that with the speed options cranked up, you will be running, jumping, turning, and blasting with ease. Borderlands 2 VR brings with it some additional interactions with Claptrap as he initiates you on some VR-specific additions to Borderlands. Most important of which is the addition of BAMF, Badass Mega Fun Time, otherwise known as slow-mo ability. This is a fantastic addition to the series, and while crucial when getting your ass handed to you in hectic firefights, proved to also lead to incredibly satisfying results. Other additions come in the form of some unique skill tree options, an incredibly fun first-person view when ripping around the game world and shooting at things in your armored buggy. And of course, Borderlands 2 VR brings with it some issues as well. Aim support, as previously mentioned, is absurdly absent, and DLC is also a no-show, along with co-op mode. Borderlands 2 VR can be played seated or standing with a moderate amount of room required if you plan on using the move controllers. Motion sickness could be an issue for those new to VR or for those easily affected by motion sickness. As such, I recommend using one of the many comfort options. For those like me who like their VR full on, turn everything off, turn all the speed settings up, and let her rip, as Borderlands 2 in VR is the experience we all wanted it to be. And that brings us to fun factor, my final review. As someone who played through all of Borderlands 2 and its DLC, I was more excited for Borderlands VR for VR than I was to actually play it again. Surprisingly though, playing it again in VR made it all feel new and fresh again. Driving felt new and fun, sniper rifles which I previously ignored became my new go-to weapon of choice, and dual wielding with the Gunzerker took on a whole new level of awesome. Big game media will likely put on their diapers and cry about motion sickness, but take it from a VR gamer. Borderlands 2 is the real deal, a full-on shooter brought into VR with very few compromises and some huge gains. I hate number ratings and instead review games on a basis of buy, wait for a sale, or burn it to the ground. Yes guys, I know this is a close to full price game for a 6-year-old port to VR. But it's good, it really is. It has a few issues, but the fun, depth, and immersion here far outweigh the negatives and make this another must-own title for PSVR owners. With Borderlands 3 on the horizon, all I can say is it better be in VR because there's no going back now. That's it for me guys. If you like this video, please hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing, and for video updates, hit that bell icon. And remember, if you want more PSVR news and info, check Shughead Gaming out on Twitter and Facebook. I'll catch you guys on my next video.